Hello, this is Paul Chek, and welcome back to my little mini-series titled Dr. Happiness and You. Today we're going to do part 2, which is on emotions. So, emotions and emotional happiness are a very, very important component of our overall sense of self and well-being. Highly unlikely you'll ever be happy if you don't have, shall we say, management of your own emotions. Emotions drive thoughts and thoughts drive emotions. So stressful emotions typically produce stressful thoughts and vice versa. So what I'd like to do to orient you to my little lesson on emotions and happiness today is point out that I've created a symbol, just like I did in the last edition of the series, to demonstrate what I feel as a holistic health practitioner would be 5 of the most essential things to look at to understand the nature of your emotions, how to manage them, and how your emotions relate to your overarching sense of happiness. First, we're going to look at love and how that relates to emotion. Then we're going to look briefly at relationships, then rhythms, then creative self-expression, and we'll finish with awareness. And I will give you things that you can use right now in your life, but I'll also point you in the direction of courses and resources I've created to help you go, significantly deeper than I could possibly go in a short little video blog. This is to excite you because there are ways of creating happiness that is enduring as opposed to just a flash in the pan. And all I can do is share how I do it. Hallelujah. All right, sometimes I rattle and sing, and sometimes I dance, and sometimes I lift weights, and sometimes I just want to sleep. But I love it, and here I am to share with you. So let's get started on the good stuff. First, we got to understand what love is to understand what emotion is. Many of us think of love as a word that describes feeling a certain way or acting a certain way. That's true of love from a social context, but love is a word with a much deeper meaning. So let's do a little cracking the love code for a moment here. L, in my experience of love and my investigations into love and meditations on the topic, L equals life. Life is something that we must desire or we stop living. People commit suicide every day. The highest desire you have in the body is to breathe. It's the most important thing you have to do or nothing else works. But when people reach a certain level of, shall we say, emotional destitute, they will take their own lives, stop the breathing, and therefore they lose the desire to life and life ends. So essentially, if an entity does not have the desire to live, then it basically stops doing the things necessary to cultivate life, and therefore without life there is no more emotion. So desire is the polarity, shall we say, that draws. We could call that positive if you want an electromagnetic polarity. Positive draws things to it. O is potential, 0. It is the basis of all creation. All things emerge from 0, as current quantum physics, astrophysics, and related sciences now show us. Stephen Hawking did a lot of work to demonstrate that the actual state of the universe, its authentic state, is 0, and everything else that emerges is, shall we say, a virtual reality, which is why he said the universe does give you a free lunch. VE is the scientific notation, interestingly, for volt electron, or the electromotive force. So in the love code, VE actually represents will. To the degree that we desire, we also will. So love you can think of like a jet engine. The harder it sucks or desires, the harder it blows or propels you. If your desire is so strong to buy a car that even though your rational mind says you cannot afford the car, you will buy the car. Look at all the people that are buying things way above and beyond their means every day, which is an example of how powerful desire is. And the desire is so strong that the willpower will support an irrational, illogical expression of self, which, as many of you know, leads to all sorts of follow-on or knock-on emotions. So as I'll show you, part of having happiness is learning to manage your desire and the emotions attached to it, because most of us are looking for love in things more so than the inner experience of love, which leads us into lots of additional emotional stress. So love, then, is the movement of energy from potential through desire into will. Love is what produces emotion or energy moving. Emotion in our bodies is an expression of energy moving, and we feel those emotions, and those emotions trigger reciprocal thoughts, so we can attempt to make meaning out of emotions. So our first stop is love. Now, if you look at all emotions combined, and a number of experts have done this, you can basically group all emotional descriptors or experiences such as anger and joy, love, frustration, elation, depression. All of those can be grouped into two basic groups: those that are oriented in love, as the expression of love that we commonly use, connection. So emotions that cause connection, which we would call a positive expression, and emotions that emerge from fear, which produces division. Anytime you have fear, if you're afraid a dog's going to bite you, you separate yourself from the dog. If you're afraid that somebody may belittle you, you're not likely to run up and hug them and kiss them and open the door for belittlement. So all of our emotions at their root are either expressions of love, the desire to connect, or fear, the desire to divide or separate. Now, interestingly enough, the act of connecting or including is the feminine principle of yin. The act of dividing or dispersing is the masculine principle of yang. Those of you that have watched enough of my blogs or studied my books and taken courses with me know that we have a constant interplay between these two forces, and that the way we manage ourselves with the four doctors, do we have a dream? Are we getting enough rest, Dr. Quiet? Are we getting enough movement, Dr. Movement? Are we feeding ourselves well enough, Dr. Happiness? So quiet, diet, movement, and happiness. Those are the basic management models by which we either stabilize ourselves or destabilize ourselves. And to the degree that we are destabilized due to mismanagement of four doctors, our biological state becomes one that is progressively more stressed, and each cell in your body that can't get adequately fed, nourished, hydrated, resources, etc., will project fear messages into the brain that are often perceived as fear coming from an external source, when really a lot of the fear that I deal with in people goes away when they have those four doctors in balance, which is the subject of our next blog on Dr. Happiness and your body. So, two root emotions, love and fear. Why is this important? Because, interestingly, not too long ago, I heard an interview with Deepak Chopra where he cited research that showed the average person thinks 68,000 thoughts a day, of which 90% are negative. So what we see is most of us are actually very, very fear-driven in our orientation toward the world, which results from relationships at large. So once we realize that a lot of the things that we're afraid of aren't really things to be afraid of, and that a lot of our ideas aren't true, we're well on our way to accessing more and more capacity to connect. Anytime you ask yourself honest questions with honest inquiry, you're moving away from a fear-based reaction and giving yourself an opportunity to have a sense of connection. Because once you realize that most of the people that are scary and stressful and irritating to you are acting out their own fears, and you can have empathy for them, you can actually see the person behind the mask, behind the story, behind the act, and you realize there's a human being behind there, and to the degree that they're irritating you, they're probably in pain. So once we become mature enough to see that in people, we begin to orient most of our thinking around love, connection, empathy, and compassion or understanding, and the nature of our experience in the world becomes a lot less fear-oriented and a lot more love-oriented, because we see everybody that has less of an understanding of us like a child falling off a bicycle or about to do something silly, and we want to support them, but we realize it's a normal process. Just like kids have to start with training wheels and progressively wean them off, we often start with a lot of fear-based thinking, a lot of harsh emotions and turmoil and tumultuous behaviors, largely because of step 2 here, relationships, but we can take advantage of those experiences and look back into ourselves once we reach this point of love orientation, and we can see almost all of our pains and all of our fears in other people, and that helps the world feel like a much more loving place, and it really is if you get behind all the fear. So love really can't be experienced without relationships. If you were the only person in the world and there was nobody here, you would have no concept of what love is. We first have a relationship with ourselves, but most people don't even entertain their own relationship with themselves from the perspective of, shall we say, being aware that they can actually change the ideas they have, or that they don't have to live out ideas that have been planted in their head. So once you begin to have a relationship with yourself where you realize, I don't have to be fat, I don't have to be skinny, I don't have to be angry, I don't have to believe in a specific religious ideology just because my family members do, then you're moving to the point where you can actually authentically have, shall we say, a palpable relationship with yourself, because you're interacting with yourself instead of simply reacting to what's happening inside this thing we call self. So love requires relationships. First, you must be aware that you have to have a relationship with yourself, and to the degree you're unaware of what you're producing in relationship to yourself, I can guarantee you're unaware of what you're producing in relationship with others, but very, very likely to become afraid of their reactions to your behavior and externalize them as agents to be afraid of, when really most of that fear is emanating from your relationship with yourself. Each of us is raised in some form of a parental environment and family environment, some form of a social environment, and some form of a cultural environment, all of which instill programming. What side of the road do you drive on? Who is the deity of your area? Are you from a country that's Buddhist? Are you from India where there's 240 million gods? Are you from the United States that largely worships a white man painted up as Jesus, who's actually a Middle Eastern man, interestingly? What you see is there's all these cultural ideologies that people will fight, kill for, and act very strangely over. And they change from culture to culture. The way we approach sex, the way we approach money, the way we approach food, the way we approach worship, the way we approach exercise, entertainment, military activities can range very, very significantly from culture to culture, or even society to society. So once we realize that a lot of the ideas in our head are actually planted there in the first 7 to 14 years of our life, when we have very little defense against what the nervous system absorbs and idealizes as real and believes in, we can easily find out what it is that we want to begin to edit by how we feel when we think we have to go to church on Sunday. Like, how many people go to church on Sunday, really don't want to do it, don't even enjoy doing it? They're sitting there because they think they have to, because they think that's what God wants. Well, your first lesson is that God has everything in the created universe already, or God's not God, so God really doesn't want anything, or God simply isn't a God. How's that for a paradox? So once we realize that we don't have to be this way, one of the fastest ways, aside from feeling what's going on inside of you and deciding, do I enjoy this, is think about how you feel when you're at a family gathering or you're at dinner and you're interacting with your parents. Or if your parents come over to your house, do you hide your pot in the cupboard? How many things do you hide from your parents so they don't actually know who you are? Those are all the things that you're doing to cover up your programming. If you're aware of what you got to hide from your parents, then you're probably becoming aware of what is inside of you that you're hiding from yourself and everybody else. So therefore, to the degree that we identify that parents, family members, or what we might call our tribe has beliefs that make us uncomfortable or don't excite us, or we feel angst about having to participate, we're being given a grand opportunity to see where we can reprogram ourselves, which, by the way, means you're becoming an adult. Walking around thinking the world is shitty and God is mean and you're going to burn in hell, even when your logical, rational mind says this doesn't make any sense at all, means that you're still living the life of a child, because you're not taking responsibility for the fact that you have your own mind and your own life, and you can live it by choosing to live it. Otherwise, you're just really a robot walking around showing all of us what it looks like to be mom and dad in another body, expressing conflict, confusion, and or possibly the better qualities of mom and dad. But until you take ownership of those and live them for your own reasons to support your own dream, you're still mommy and daddy idealized as a living puppet. And it's time to become an adult to the degree that your software given here isn't congruent with your dream, and upgrade. But nobody's going to come force you to do that. And many, 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 many people will make truckloads of money medicating you because it's profitable if you don't do that. Next, we have to look at, before we move on, your beliefs. Ask yourself the question, is it true? I have to go to church on Sunday or I can't get to heaven. Is that really true? Next, as Byron Katie would suggest you do, ask yourself, how do I feel when I do not think that thought? If not thinking the thought brings you closer to a state of feeling balanced and authentically happy, then you have your answer already. So as I've shared before, when the pain teacher emerges, don't fight with the Sunday school concept. Idealize what's real for you. I do not need to go to Sunday school. Great Spirit, God is everywhere and is everything, and I can worship right here inside myself beautifully, because the same being that created the Sunday school created this temple. Simple as that. And then live that way. Okay? Rhythms are essential to understanding emotion, because energy typically moves rhythmically in nature. So if you look at a river flowing, there's some rhythm to it. If you watch an animal like a dog or a horse or a cat run, there's a rhythm. If you watch a ballet dancer dance or a hip-hop dancer dance or any such thing, you can almost always see a rhythm. If you look at how a movie is made, there's a rhythm. If you look at singing, there's a rhythm. So rhythm is very, very important to emotions, and I can easily demonstrate that to you. If you were sitting at dinner and all of a sudden somebody pulled out a pair of rattles and started just making all sorts of chaotic noises, it would disrupt the rhythm inside of you. It would disrupt the rhythm of your eating and your relating to each other. So rhythm is extremely important to emotions, and we must be aware that our primary rhythms are seasonal rhythms. They are lunar rhythms, especially if you're a woman. So you have your menstrual cycle. We have monthly rhythms, weekly rhythms, and we have daily rhythms, a 24-hour circadian rhythm, which is extremely important. The importance of those rhythms goes all the way to breath. Breath is the first and most important rhythm, and all of us have a breathing rhythm. Once you go past the breath rhythm, then you got to look at the rhythm of feeding. And before you get to the rhythm of feeding, a shorter rhythm in there is the rhythm of urination. The rhythm of feeding is parallel usually with the rhythms of defecation. So you see, we have all these rhythms nested within us, and the breathing rhythm happens to approximately 25,900 times a day in the average human being. And that breathing rhythm then is encompassed in the circadian rhythm, of which about 16 hours are ideally spent in the waking state, 8 spent in the sleeping state, so that you can effectively not only let your physiology rest, but balance your rational psyche with your irrational, which is what dreaming does. Okay, so rhythms are critical, and I talk a lot about rhythms in my Last Four Doctors book, my Eat, Move, and Be Healthy book, and many of my programs in HLC1 training. If you're more interested, by the way, if you're interested in learning how to reprogram yourself, I do have some good comprehensive training on that. My first 3 lessons of the PPS Success Master Program, Lesson 1, how to find and live your legacy or your overarching dream, goes into your family programming quite deeply. Lesson 2, which is all about self-management, goes into the science of brainwashing and how brainwashing is being used against you and to get you to buy and do all sorts of things every day. And the science of brainwashing can then be used to, shall we say, get rid of all the unwanted programming. That's PPS Lesson 2. And PPS Lesson 3 is how to set goals for yourself practically and intelligently. So that really deals with a lot of these challenges over here. The rhythm training is also significant in PPS Lesson 2, just for your knowledge. So rhythms then mean undulations in the flow of energy in differing cycles, all of which create life. If there is no rhythm, there's no movement, and there's probably no life. Nothing in life moves in a straight line. Next, for emotional happiness, we must look at the issue of creative self-expression. Here you see the Tai Chi symbol. I've spoke about this in a previous blog and possibly multiple previous blogs, but if we look at self-expression from the perspective of what are the 2 modes of interpreting our experiences, our thoughts and emotions? Well, we have the yin, which I refer to as the irrational, the intuitive, being open. A mother's open to her children, whether they've misbehaved or not. She receives them. She may not like what they've done, but she's open to them, or she's not a mother. And then unbound play. The mother lets the kids play, and she watches over them while they play, but she doesn't typically put so many rules in place that the kid can't play. That's what happens when dad's out at home. Okay, then we have the yang expression, which is the rational and the logical. Do this because. Well, this naturally fits there because. 2 plus 2 is rationally and logically 4. But watch this. 2 plus 2 is rationally and logically 4 only because we've all agreed that 0 equals nothing. But if 0 actually had a value, then 2 plus 2 could equal anything depending on what we assign the value of 0 to. So being overly rational and logical is the antithesis or the opposite of being poetic. So here we have poetic experience and expression, and here we have prose. Here we have mathematical logical, here we have intuitive creative. One without the other makes for very flat living. I think Einstein said something like, religion without science is lost, and science without religion is lame. So all he's saying is you need 2 halves of investigation and experience, or you're confused and lost. So creative self-expression then, just as the Tai Chi symbol suggests that nature is a perpetual balancing act, is a balancing act between the rational expression of yourself and the rational actions in your life and the irrational. To get shit-faced drunk and crash your car or lose your job or get addicted to alcohol is irrational. Usually to the degree that you're overly trapped in the rational, you perform irrational acts. The problem in our culture is that we've legalized many, many dangerous substances, and we essentially try to make it legal for everyone to go get shit-faced drunk and to become an alcoholic, or to get stuck smoking cigarettes or eating processed sugar to get high. And that makes a logical culture, a rational culture, highly profitable to those that prey on this imbalance, when really there's many healthier substances that would go a long ways towards balancing your emotions. And one of them is just to play more, do art, dance, sing, and get out of your head and quit telling yourself all the stories that your dad told you about being useless unless you're busy, or never being successful unless you're working 60 or 80 hours a week, because that story will produce exactly in you what it did in your father. So if you want to be that, go ahead. But if you want to be happy emotionally and understand happiness, I can tell you after 30 years of coaching people of all sorts of problems and types, whenever these two are out of balance, you're not going to achieve happiness. You're going to be like boiling water. Next, we need to look at awareness. You can never change without awareness. You can't identify your negative thoughts, your parental programming, and upgrade your software without being aware. And we're being given the information we need 24 hours a day. Now, how many people, if they have a rock in their shoe, become aware of it right away and do something about it, but have had scary beliefs like God will burn you in hell for their whole life, and even though their rational mind thinks that that's not true, still actually act that out? There's a case of a very serious lack of awareness. So we need to be aware of our thoughts and edit them. Is it true? How do I feel when I think that thought? What is my dream, and how could I take that negative thought and state it dream affirmatively? I'm not good enough, I'll never accomplish such and such. Turn that over. I'm not good enough can only exist because I am good enough is equally true. If you cannot buy into I am good enough, then remember, love always carries the potential to become anything you want. So I'm not good enough converts to I am good enough. If you can't buy into that honestly, then you say I have the potential to be good enough, and I'm excited to begin becoming that person right now. That is how you effectively use your mind, and many other techniques that I teach in my various programs. Edit your feelings. If you're angry, ask yourself, is it really worth it? Am I doing more damage to me than this person's silliness is actually worth? Usually the answer is, it's not worth it. So again, step back, look through the eyes of love, see the pain in the child in front of you, and try to give them space to outgas, and then give them empathy, and usually it dissipates and you forget about it soon. Body feedback is the subject of our next segment, but your body's constantly giving you feedback. Remember the old metaphysical adage, as above, so below, as below, so above. Whatever's going through your head is creating your body. Whatever happens in your body influences your perception of what's going through your head. So it's like the Ouroboros, the snake that eats its tail. If it eats too much, who's to blame? If it doesn't eat enough, who's to blame? If it's sad, who's to blame? If it's happy, hallelujah, you are that. Okay? So here we have made a full turn on the 5-point star. A little ebook I wrote, which is at ppssuccess.com, is called Paint a Circle Around Your Arrow and Hit the Bullseye Every Time. And it's a very, very important story that will help people heal from a lot of the religious programming and interesting beliefs that are like the shell on the chicken's egg that to be an adult you've got to break out of. So paint a circle around your arrow, hit the bullseye every time, and if you do paint a circle around your arrow, you will hit the bullseye every time, and that's what I call using your right brain. Okay? So I've also want to close by mentioning Holistic Lifestyle Coaching Level 1 teaches you how to master everything in my book, How to Eat, Move, and Be Healthy, and more. And you get to meet with very, very cool people who are as interested and as excited about being healthy, vital, and living their dreams and learning how to be happy as a consistent theme as you are. And that's what we call an edu party, baby. I'll see you there.